All right, 15th Amendment is the final thing that comes out under the Grant administration among your amendments. Okay, 13th, abolish slavery. 14th, define citizenship. 15th says the right to vote shall not be denied based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude, which might be a previous slave or something like that. And so Grant is now President of the United States, and he's there pretty much thinking the South now knows we're very serious about this. Okay, Reconstruction governments in the South now go forward based on those 5 military districts. This is a couple of IDs for you. Scalawags and carpetbaggers. The South is irritated. The South has got a choice. It can either fight these federal troops coming in. Can it fight the federal troops? Should it do it? Probably not. Should they participate? Should they go along with what they're doing? Here's what the Southern dominant white group does. They decide to boycott the elections. They will not participate in these new governments. They're going to bide their time. But some Southern whites do get involved in these governments, and they do stand for office, and they are known as scalawags. Yo, scalawag, right? You traitor. Scalawags are Southern whites who stand for office. East Tennessee would be full of scalawags. This was an opportunity for the non-propertied class who weren't under the tradition of planter leadership. They weren't deferential to planters. They were independent-minded Southern whites who didn't like the planters. They went ahead and stood for office. But the planter class wants to call them scalawags. You are working with the people who are invading us. The other ones are carpetbaggers. Carpetbags, the first luggage in America was to take old carpets and cut them up and sew them in such a way that you have a bag. And so carpetbaggers would be people who've arrived by with suitcases. Now, so I'm talking about the makeup of the Southern governments that get elected and in place with military reconstruction. Who comes out to vote? Well, some Southern whites come out to vote. I've told you who they are. But some Northerners come to the South and they hold office and they stand for office. Now, Southern whites end up calling them carpetbaggers. You guys are Northerners who come down here and taken advantage of our difficulty. You're only in power because you support this invading force, and you're only down here to make money. This is like this gigantic carpetbag, right? You're only here for loot, to loot the South. And our poor good government, Lady Columbia, is struggling under your Reconstruction government. Now, this is the interpretation of the dominant Southern white redeemers after they managed to end this thing. And I will tell you this, the South, also the third group that participates in these Southern Republican governments are blacks who come out to hold office. Free blacks from places like South Carolina, businessmen who were African American and who lived within an apartheid world but weren't slaves. They hold office. We have one governor from South Carolina, and we have 9 congressmen who get sent to Washington. So we have Southern blacks, not a large number, holding office, scalawags, Southern whites, and then carpetbaggers, interlopers as they would call them. They form these governments. Those governments are only in power because military is there from the North. That's the Reconstruction governments. All right. Now, the whiskey ring. There's a lot of corruption in American state, city, and federal government in the 19th century. People enter office or politics to make money on the political process, on the spending of money. And under Grant's administration, some of his key people get accused of corruption. The whiskey ring is a group of people who were involved in the collection of whiskey taxes. A group gets together of conspirators and they say, hey, there's a lot of money coming in here. That's a lot of money. We're only getting, $3,000 a year for a salary. Let's all take some of this, right? And so they get people back in Washington on the payroll too, and they've got to cook the books. But enough of them get in a ring, right? Like a gang. They get together and they are like siphoning off. I mean, it worked once, let's do it again. They're like taking all this money. Now, Congress has to go after them. And liberal Republicans don't like this from New England. And Grant, they think Grant's looking the other way, and it undermines Grant's administration. I'll just say that. Now, Mississippi had an occupation. Mississippi whites, most of them, don't participate in this new formation of government. But a government is formed, and they have a governor, and they have a Congress, and they've got mayors, and they are scalawags, carpetbaggers, or African Americans. Okay, there's their government. 1 year goes by, 2 years goes by. Now the question is, how long do the federal troops stay? And they say, I think that government's good. We'll leave. And so they pull the troops out of Mississippi. And then we have the Mississippi Plan. The Mississippi Plan is now the old whites come back and start challenging those Republican governments. By the way, every one of those new governments in the South, guess what party they are? They're all Republicans, right? They're not Democrats. Democrats weren't voting. So now majority white men come out who don't like blacks, and they don't like the Republican Party, and now they challenge, but they do more than that. The Mississippi Plan is about coming back and challenging, but also assassinations, intimidation, and they start attacking blacks who want to hold office. They attack blacks who want to come out and vote. They assassinate leaders, and they also are the majority of the people, who are, by the way, the redeemers are these old Southern planters who say now it's time to come back and overthrow those Republican governments and restore the rightful Democratic leadership of Mississippi. What's the choice now? You send the federal troops back in because of the assassinations and such? Now the North's got an interesting question to ask themselves. How long do we stay in the South? It was anger at Johnson. Johnson's gone. So now what happens is the interest of the North begins to wane. And guess what they decide to do? Fatefully, they decide not to send troops back in. And Mississippi is no longer a Republican government, but now it's a Democratic government. They've got a new governor. They've got assassinations going on. They've got new elections. And the North, so that's a green light to the other states. So the Mississippi Plan goes from state to state as federal troops are pulled out. And those moderate Republicans from Indiana and Ohio and Wisconsin and Illinois, they're like, the South's going to be the South, right? We'll just leave it alone and we'll go forward. We're going west. We got the Western territories opening up. We got industrialization taking on. Maybe we'll just let the South be the South. So now, with these Reconstruction governments being overthrown and the Democratic Party coming back in, you've now got Jim Crow comes in. You know what Jim Crow is? All these restrictions on African Americans in the South. Now that the Democratic Party is coming back in, they want to strip the rights of African Americans as much as possible. They make it so they can't vote. These are just depictions of the time about anger towards African Americans. The end of Reconstruction. Grant has 2 terms. It's 1876 election. This is your ID, Tilden or Blood. Tilden is the governor from New York who runs for president as a Democrat. Governor of New York running for president. He's counting on the vote of these redeemed states. Mississippi had voted for Grant in 1872 because it was still under occupation. But now that that's Democratic Party again, they're going to vote for this northern guy from New York now. The Democratic Party is starting to come together back as a national party now. And Mississippi's, Alabama's been redeemed, and Georgia, and he's up against Hayes, Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes was a man from Indiana who was a Republican, who was a Northern general, and he's running. The election comes down, and look at these numbers. It looks like Tilden won by about 200,000 votes. That's a tight election, right? But what ends up happening is that there are 3 states in question. South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana still have federal troops in there. And they don't have independent governments yet. And what ends up happening is these states send their results to Washington, their electors, and they say, Republicans won down here. The Democrats say there's no way Republicans won down there. There's not enough of them. They're mostly Democrats down there. And so it's going to go to the House of Representatives. And that's where the Compromise of 1877 takes place.